Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. My name is Councillor David Connor, and I'm Chairman of the Planning Committee here at Fenland. Welcome to all those members via the press and public who are joining us via the live stream. Before we begin, please can I take this opportunity to remind everyone to turn their mobiles and computers to silent and ensure when using the microphone the red light is on and then turned off when you finish speaking. So without further ado, we go to agenda item number 1, and I'd like to ask member services if we have any apologies for absent, and it's Joe today. Thank you, Joe.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. Apologies received today from Councillor Marks, and Councillor Purser is a substitute member today for him. Thank you.
Councillor Benny.
Thank you, Mrs French.
Thank you, Councillor Purser, for substituting. Excellent, thank you. Agenda item 2, which is urgent minutes. Again, there are none. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Member services will now go to each councillor in turn, and can you please state if you have anything to declare in relation to any agenda item? Well, there's only one today, but yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Connor.
Yep. On this application, I attended a presentation given by Mr Rice at Fenland District Council offices here. Other members and officers were present. This application was in its infancy at this particular time, and I made no comment on the merits of the said application. As always, I will keep an open mind and listen to the officers and agents' presentation, and will vote accordingly. And just this is an en bloc declaration for all councillors. Finally, all members on the committee know council laws and council bodens. Are they elected council members of this authority? So, members, you need to make a declaration if you don't want to, or of course you can do, because I've already done it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Mrs French.
Thank you, Joe. I am a member of Cabinet, so I do work with Councillor Bowden and Councillor Law, but I have not spoken to either of them about this application.
Thank you. Councillor Gershner.
Thank you. I have met the agent on 2 occasions prior to today where we only spoke about vacations. I attended the open public meeting. I had a conversation with for less than 1 minute, and it was not to do with planning matters today. So again, I keep a completely open mind on this particular application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mafferdon.
Thank you. I'm also a member of Cabinet, and I do attend Cabinet meetings with the leader and, Councillor Bowden and Councillor Laws, and I'm also a member of an IDB. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Meekins.
Just a member of Wisbech Town Council, nothing to declare on this item.
Thank you. Councillor Purser.
Yes, member of March Town Council, nothing to declare on this item. As obviously Councillor Connor said, we all know these people, but we haven't discussed anything with them at all. So I've got an open mind on this completely.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Now we'll go to the main part of the meeting. Members should only make a proposal on the planning application when invited. However, I'll initially be asking if anybody is going to propose the officer's recommendation. Clearly, if no such proposal is forthcoming or that proposal fails, then I'll be looking for an alternative proposal. Members are reminded that any such proposal should be accompanied by policy, planning, reasons for doing so against officer recommendation. So I'll now hand over to Gavin Taylor. He's the Principal Development Officer here at Fenland to present application F/YR24/0903/0, agenda item 4. So Gavin, when you're ready, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So this application is a proposal in outline with only access committed for up to 65,000 square metres floor space of Class E buildings, renewable energy infrastructure, parking, country park, and other such infrastructure. It's that land adjacent to the New Saxon Works in Peterborough Road in Whittlesea. Just carrying on to the application, if I just refer to updates circulated yesterday to members in respect of sort of further information and points of clarification as to water supply, resident objection, further comments from the Saxon Gate Residents Group, and comments from Cambridgeshire County Council's archaeological team. Further to that, received this morning are some additional updates which I'll convey verbally now. So we are in receipt of a letter from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, which in exercise of their powers under Article 31 of the Town and Country Planning and Development Management Procedure Order, the Secretary of State has directed that the Council is not to grant permission on this application without specific authorisation. The direction is issued to enable them to consider whether they should direct under Section 77 of the Town and Country Planning Act that the application should be referred to them for determination. It's important to note, though, this direction does not prevent the Council from considering the application or forming a view as to the merits, or if they're so minded to refuse the planning permission. In essence, this direction should not influence the decision-making of this Council, only that should the Council resolve to grant permission, the Secretary of State requires time to consider whether to call the application in for their own consideration before the Council issues any planning permission. In addition to that, we've received further comments from the Council's Ecological Officer, who has considered the additional comments provided by the Saxon Gate Residents Group, received over the weekend, referred to in the update report yesterday, particularly in respect of their concerns over the habitats regulation assessment that's undertaken. As per the update circulated yesterday, our ecologist has confirmed that the recommendations of that habitats regulation assessment sets out a requirement to review the assessment following receipt of reserved matters, including also the water resources strategy, which is required under proposed condition 12. In addition to that, we've received further comments from Fenland District Council's Environmental Health team. They've considered also the additional comments provided by the Saxon Gate Residents Group, which covers a number of matters regarding pollution controls, exposure to pollution, ongoing Saxon pit investigations and monitoring and enforcement concerns. They've reviewed all those comments, they've reviewed the committee update circulated yesterday and the proposed conditions set out in the planning officer's report, and advised that they're satisfied that there are necessary controls secured and raised no objection on that basis. I've also had updates received from middle level commissioners as the Internal Drainage Board this morning. Further to their previous comments received 24th of November last year, they've advised that they note the proposal is to discharge surface water via the adjacent Saxon pits discharge into the King's Dyke. They're aware that the Environment Agency is considering a foul trade effluent discharge permit application for this particular outfall. As such, it should not be assumed that middle-level commissioners would grant consent to discharge surface water via this outfall. An alternative discharge directly from this site may be required. Any surface water discharge will require the prior consent of middle-level commissioners, and they advise it must not be assumed that such consent will be granted. They note proposals for foul effluent discharge may be via the Anglian Water Network, and such discharge will also require prior consent from middle-level commissioners as this ultimately discharges into the King's Dyke. They advise it must not again be assumed that consent will be granted, particularly given the objections of Anglian Water and the Environment Agency due to capacity issues currently. They strongly request that any conditions relating to surface water or foul discharges from the site are subject to conditions requiring middle-level commissioners' prior consent, as required under middle-level bylaws and agreement and approval of final planning decisions. In this regard, there are a number of conditions securing water supply strategy, foul and surface water drainage strategies, and these conditions will be consulted with via Lead Local Flood Authority, the EA, Anglian Water and middle-level commissioners when such conditions come in to be discharged or when such reserve matters applications are received, as is our standard approach. So in conclusion, the further matters set out, both in this verbal update and yesterday's, raise no further material matters to those not already addressed within the report, and the recommended planning conditions as a result. If I can just move now on to the presentation. So the site is located to the western edge of Whittlesea, sort of broadly triangular in shape, as you can see there, but adjacent to the sort of built frontage of Whittlesea over to the eastern side of the site there. It's a former brick quarry. There's a large lake remaining, which you can see in the aerial photograph there in the dark area. The eastern point abuts the Ralph Butcher Causeway, the eastern roundabout of that section of road. To the northeast, there's an area of woodland, sort of scrubland grassland, which leads you up onto the A605. Snoots Road and the housing associated with that is over to the east of the site. Saxon Pit, as sort of briefly referred to a short while ago, is just off centre to the site there. You can see it sort of sits in that area red around the sort of centre of the site, which is an existing commercial site. Note that that sits about 25 metres lower than the actual application site considered today. So the A605 runs across the sort of northern boundary of the site in an east to west direction. The site is allocated as a broad location for growth in our local plan for employment use. And just in terms of some of the other features, there is a railway line that runs along the southern boundary of the site. Public byways sort of to the south of that, you can probably just make out through the dashed and dotted line south of the railway line. And there's a green route to the north that basically extends westwards into Peterborough, which is Cycleway 63. So the application is in outline only with access committed, but nonetheless is supported by a series of plans. This is an indicative site layout plan, which sort of provides an indication as to how the applicant considers the buildings could be arranged around the site in order to accommodate the quantum of development. As you can see, it shows primarily sort of the vehicular access off of a brand new fourth arm of that roundabout over to the west. The lake forms quite a central feature to a number of those buildings, and therefore sort of a focal point. Buildings along the southern boundary are also proposed, and over to the east, particularly a larger building known as Building M, adjacent to that Saxon Pit building development. It's a cycle and pedestrian route northeast that takes you back up onto the A605 through an area of sort of parkland, woodland, country park, and that also sort of circles the perimeter of the wider site. As you can see, it sort of extends over to the east, looping back via to the south of the site there. The solar panels you can probably just make out in the area grey to the east, which are proposed to sort of provide some power to the site. And obviously, I say the concentration of buildings really is over to that sort of eastern side of the wider parcel there. So the application is also supported by an indicative phasing plan, which shows the development coming forward generally in about 3 phases, starting with sort of key buildings over to that eastern side, which will also include sort of amenity buildings, and then the building under phase 1 over to the east, which is sort of proposed to target sort of advanced manufacturing, which is proposed to be sort of adjacent to the existing Saxon Pit, which is a more sort of compatible use in that regard. With the remaining phase there sort of in the centre and to the southeast, we'll sort of deliver buildings primarily sort of around that lake area as a sort of focal point around there, and then obviously further buildings to the southeast to sort of accompany that manufacturing side of proposal. So this is a plan that sort of sets out the nature of some of the buildings, the sort of their individual uses. As I say, they all sort of fall under Class E primarily. Building A is proposed to sort of be that mobility hub, which we'll come on to in a short while in terms of sort of transport. Building B, you can see that sort of shaped building, a feature building, which will sit quite prominently on that western side, is proposed to sort of be a statement building, primarily providing office space, with an energy and innovation centre, sort of building C, and then D to J primarily will be offices and laboratories, sort of facing out onto that lake area. Building N, as you can see there, is proposed to sort of be an incubator hub for sort of startups, research development, might include campus reception, management offices, sort of meeting rooms, conference facilities, and then within that lake area as well, there's envisaged sort of a gym and a cafe, more recreational sort of uses to support the wider development. So this is the access arrangement off of the Ralph Butcher Causeway, the eastern roundabout, which proposes to come straight off to introduce a 4th arm, and it obviously drops down into that site because of the sort of the levels changes, so a gradiated sort of drop into that site. There's also a footway proposed around the site, which would take users up onto the A605, should they wish to, on the Peterborough Road. There's an existing bus stop along that way. There are footway crossing points proposed on that roundabout, and this access arrangement has undergone a phase 1 road safety audit, which is deemed to be generally acceptable, subject to sort of further details at section 278 and design design pathways in the future. So this is the pedestrian cycle enhancement route. This is at the northeastern end of the site, up onto the Peterborough Road. So you can just see there, from that country park area I mentioned earlier, there are cycle and pedestrian routes straight onto the area there with the 605 is onto new bits of footway and cycleway with a crossing point, controlled crossing point that will take users up into Crossway Hand, where they can either then continue up to sort of Stonald Road or that cycleway that I mentioned earlier that takes you to Peterborough, or obviously along the Peterborough Road via a new section of footway cycleway that's supposed to take you to Snoots Road, and obviously from there access to the train station and beyond if required. The bus stop that exists there, pretty much directly opposite to Crossway Hand, is proposed to be set back into the application site to enable that footway cycleway to be delivered, with real-time passenger information board on that site as well. And again, this has been safety audited and considers to be acceptable, subject to sort of final design. So the proposal is supported by a transport assessment and travel plan, and obviously the key focus of it is to secure sort of sustainable travel means in order to reduce reliance on car modes of travel. This has been updated through technical notes, further evidence, a meeting with County Council Highway Authority during the application process. The development itself follows a vision-led approach to the transport aims of the project, with an applicant's ambition to achieve 50% modal share, so essentially 50% of people travelling other than by car. This is achieved through identifying and encouraging travel via footways, cycleways, bus, and other sort of alternative modes of travel. And part of the design access statement includes sort of a vision as to how that would work. Again, we mentioned the mobility hub, that's the top photo there. And obviously cycle hire, scooter hire is also proposed within that sort of travel plan as a broader vision. The plans over to the left show the existing sort of networks that exist for both pedestrians, that's the top photo, and there's a top aerial picture, and then cyclists at the bottom, so you can sort of see the various routes that can be taken, which take you to various parts of Whittlesea, and again up to that cycleway up at Peterborough there, towards Peterborough. So this is a sort of landscaping concept plan, which is obviously based on that indicative layout. It denotes areas of sort of enhanced landscaping to create buffers, for example, from the manufacturing area to the other office buildings, green routes between the buildings, and obviously enhancement areas around that lake. The landscaping obviously is reserved matter. It would be expected to create a sort of the attractive setting, but whilst exploiting opportunities to boost biodiversity across the site, therefore underpinning the sort of biodiversity net gain assessment that's been undertaken. So the application is also supported by sort of an outline drainage strategy. There are obviously conditions proposed to secure the final strategy, and obviously this is also taking into consideration latest comments from Environment Agency, middle level commissioners, Anglian Water, etc. But nonetheless, the concept strategy proposes to sort of utilise and exploit that lake as much as possible in terms of sort of attenuating with sort of any exceedance sort of picked up via additional SUDS features over to the east by that building M, as you can see there. And then obviously with any further excess to be sort of sent southwards, there's a reed bed on the southern boundary there, or proposed to be an enhancement to that reed bed for sort of treatment works before discharging into that King's Delph. Now obviously, as I mentioned earlier, consents would be required for this ultimately, and there are conditions requiring detailed drainage strategies, depending obviously on sort of how the layout would evolve in the future. So just quickly some photos. So you can see the top photo there is sort of approaching from the west to the application site on that Ralph Butcher Causeway. As you can see the roundabout just in the distance, which is proposed to include that fourth arm into the site, so you can sort of get a feel for the levels changes as you approach from that area. As you can see, the left photograph is sort of there's a bus stop there, and you can sort of see those bottom photographs panning across the site to get a sort of understanding of its current condition. Again, these are photographs taken within the site. So the top left photograph is standing within the site. The lake is actually over to the left, and takes you back onto the A605 Peterborough Road, where the sort of emergency access currently exists. Obviously, the lake you can see on the top right photograph there, so sort of panning round essentially from sort of west through to east. So that bottom left photographs you can just see, and bottom right photographs you can see the Ralph Butcher Causeway just slightly elevated in the distance there. These sort of essentially show the Saxon Pit operations. As I mentioned earlier, the site is quite a bit lower than the application site, around about 25 metres, so you can just see. So these photographs really sort of panning east, northeast across, and you can see the areas of woodland and scrubland, as I mentioned earlier, in the distance around that perimeter of the site that's proposed to be utilised for sort of country park, circular walking routes, etc. And Snoots Road, you won't be able to see because the tree lines are blocking it, but Snoots Road is sort of situated beyond that tree line there. So as I mentioned, there's emergency access proposed with this site. So the top left photograph shows that Whittlesea Road emergency access road. It's an existing access route serving the Saxon Pit site. You can access the application site via this at the moment. The proposal is obviously to restrict access for emergencies only on that access point. And further details are required through planning condition. The top right photograph is that intersection between the Peterborough Road and Crossway Hand. So again, you can just make out the bus stop on the top right photo there. That's certainly on the bottom left photo. And obviously around that area is proposed to be that new arrangement of footway, cycleway, the control crossing point, and obviously upgrades to encourage sort of cyclists and pedestrians and assist them accessing the northeastern part of the site. So in summary, the application is an outline for redevelopment of this site to provide at this time a campus for science and technology-based businesses, along with sort of associated buildings and infrastructure. All matters are reserved apart from access. Policies of the local plan support the principle of employment uses at this site, with LP11 identifying that broad location for growth for such uses. The NPPF does promote effective use of land in meeting the need for homes and other uses. The application has been subject to a number of amendments, clarifications, and obviously discussion, mostly in respect of highways and sort of drainage matters. Whilst only access is committed, with matters of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping reserved, the outline plans nonetheless do indicate a broadly compliant scheme could be achieved in respect to sort of access design and associated highway safety with those accesses, as well as visual impacts, drainage and flood risk management, biodiversity protection and enhancement of residential amenity protection. It is acknowledged that this development will increase traffic at key junctions in and around the application site, and these may result in cumulative impacts that won't be wholly mitigated. And it's been identified that in some instances at peak hours, these impacts could be severe, particularly if the modal share ambitions set out by the applicant are not achieved. Peterborough Highways consider these impacts may pose highway safety issues, mainly in respect of sort of driver frustration leading to risk-taking at junctions, etc. To reduce the impact, the applicant has agreed in principle to contributions, proportionate contributions, towards enhancing active travel infrastructure that's been identified through existing sort of reviews, and also to a trip cap penalty, which ultimately would mean payments if those modal shares are not realised at certain stages through the development. So these contributions could be spent towards sort of localised improvements to try and, with an aim to try and reduce private motor car reliance or alleviate existing issues, although it is identified that these may not avoid some of the severe cumulative impacts on the network that the Highways Authority have identified. The development would therefore pose conflict with a key policy of the local plan, particularly in achieving sustainable transport outcomes, with only partial mitigation identified. This obviously carries negative weight in the assessment. Having regard to the Council's statutory duty, it's considered, however, that on balance, the material planning benefits of this proposal in respect of securing significant employment, economic growth potential, biodiversity gains and effective reuse of land on a site that is already allocated for employment uses they are worthy of sufficient weight so as to outweigh this policy conflict with the development plan in this instance. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to those conditions set out in the report and completion of an appropriate Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Very comprehensive report. We have 4 speakers on this application. First, I'd like to invite Councillor Chris Bowden. Today, he's speaking as the County Councillor to make his presentation. You've got 5 minutes, Councillor Bowden, when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair and members. I do have a heavy cold, so if my voice goes quiet, please do tell me and I'll try and do better. I am here as primarily as the County Councillor for this particular site. I'd like first of all to endorse the officer's report and the recommendation to approve that you have before you today. Although I do note that this is an outline application, and this is quite important because there are some matters of detail which do need to be sorted out, but they can be sorted out under reserved matters. This application has been the subject of a successful pre-app and has also got the approval of the Town Council. The positive effects, the positive economic effects of this proposal are absolutely huge, not merely for Whittlesea, but for Fenland as a whole. But I'll leave it to Councillor Laws to say more about the positive side of all of this. And the location is really important because there are no material effects on residential amenity as far as this application is concerned, which can't be said for any other economic growth area that there is a potential for in Whittlesea. But all planning applications, as members will be aware, Chair, all planning applications do involve taking a balanced view of the pros and the cons. And I believe officers have got the balance right in this case, but most of the cons which have been put forward, most of the objections have been on transport issues, and I think that it's appropriate for me to say a few words about that. I've been in some contact with the Highways Department at County Council about this, and I've been somewhat frustrated by their approach to this particular application. And I've been particularly frustrated because I don't actually think that their approach has been the correct one. Members will be aware, and officers can give advice to members at a later point in today's meeting about this if you so wish, but members may well be aware that there was a fundamental change in the National Policy Planning Framework in December 2024, so far as transport planning is concerned. And that was a change from a predict and provide model to a vision and validate model. And unfortunately, it seemed to me the County Council was still stuck on the predict and provide model. They actually weren't following the current National Policy Planning Framework so far as transport planning was concerned. But again, I'd seek to get, suggest members get advice from officers about that matter. The important thing about the traffic situation is the cumulative impact that there is, not merely of this, but all the other applications that there are within Fenland. And I have to say, and I'm going to emphasise this point, that the comments which have been made by the County Council and by Peterborough City Council go to show what I have been saying for some time, and I have on occasion come before this committee, and that is we are reaching the point where the current transport network within Whittlesea and outside Whittlesea cannot cope with significant major additional development. We're approaching that position. I believe that the advantages of this scheme outweigh the disbenefits that there are, but we have had a significant number of new applications which have come through in the last few years for additional housing, all of which add to the negative effects on transport in the area. And there is another application coming through in the next few months, which will be coming through on the next door site in Saxon Pit, which will also suggest a significant increase in heavy goods vehicle transport coming into Whittlesea. We just cannot continue to have these cumulative effects just adding on top of each other. We're reaching the limit. We haven't got there yet, in my opinion, but we are reaching that limit. And it's important that this be taken into context because we do need additional employment within the Whittlesea area. We need it within Fenland. We also need this sort of employment, this sort of economic development is exactly the sort of thing we want. We don't want, to be quite honest, all of the advanced engineering and research employment that there is, all of it going to Peterborough, and we're left with the back end of nothing so far as economic development is concerned. We in Fenland need this sort of development, and it is inherently good. I looked carefully at what Peterborough City Council had been saying so far as highways is concerned, most of which is to do with Peterborough, and much of that, I have to say, assumes, I think, more peak hour access to the site than there reasonably will be. This will have quite a lot of 24/7 operation when it's operating, and also, by the nature of the type of development, there'll be quite a lot of remote working as well. So I'm dubious about some of their calculations, but I'm more than happy, Chairman, to take any questions from any members. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Bowden. You've said it. Members, questions, clarifications to Councillor Bowden. Have you got any? Councillor French, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. I know you've been talking about the 605, the A605 being up to almost capacity, and you've been trying to pursue a bypass. Have you got any further?
Well, yes, within Fenland District Council, we did receive a report, I believe it was earlier this year, about the A605 potential relief road. And we are looking towards, and I'm hoping to bring something to the next meeting of council, to be quite honest, or cabinet. We're looking towards a further report to be produced to move that forward. That will take time. The idea that that's going to materialise in this decade is nonsense. It'll be next decade at best. And our problem with the A605, whilst we do have several problems in different areas, our biggest and most immediate problems will actually be in the town centre itself at the two roundabouts, known as the Kelly Vision roundabout and the Cemetery Road roundabout, and that is where the most significant impact is, and that will be least impacted by this particular development.
Councillor Gerstner, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden, and thank you for championing the A605, past, present, future. Thank you. As you're well aware, the A605 is what we call surcharged. I came out there this morning and the Kelly Vision roundabout was chock-a-block. That's today. It's not next year or last year, this is today. We are the second highest HGV traffic in Fenland. That's HGV. The state of the A605 is in a terrible condition, which everybody agrees with. It has severe limitations on what can be done on the A605. There's probably no widening available to it. So thank you, but the question is the A605. It is in such, not only a bad state of repair, but by putting more traffic on there, and we're talking about a potential of 1,300 to 1,600 jobs at the science park in many years' time. Okay, it's again the cumulative effect of
that. Anyone else at all? Councillor French again, thank you. You can answer if you like. I just thought it was...
Oh yes, I'd be delighted to answer. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. And I'd like to thank Councillor Gerstner for his contribution. And he is correct. There are times when the A605 is chock-a-block, and it's going to get worse because development which has been approved, still, residential development in particular, still has to be built out. So what we see at the moment is going to get worse, and he mentioned one of the two roundabouts. The Kelly Vision roundabout and the Cemetery Road roundabout are going to get worse. We know that, particularly at peak hours, and there are going to be all sorts of implications about that. But the objections on transport, the transport side, which are primarily being brought forward on this, aren't to do with the Kelly Vision roundabout or the Cemetery Road roundabout. They're primarily to do with the Kingsdyke Bridge and with junctions in Peterborough City Council area. And I have to say that I think that distinction is a really important one to make. If anything, one of the good things about this is that if you have to have an increase in traffic, have it against the flow of peak hour traffic that we've currently got. And that's what this application will cause. It will increase traffic. Anyone saying it doesn't is just nonsense. It obviously will increase traffic, but the greatest increase in traffic will be against the current peak hour flow. And that minimises the effect that it would have. If it were an addition to the current direction of peak hour flow in both directions, morning and afternoon, evening, then it would be a very different matter, but it won't be. Additionally, the state of the roads, Councillor Gerstner is, of course, completely and utterly correct. I saw a pothole on the A605 this morning as I was driving through, which was literally a metre wide on the edge of the road. But the state of the roads, unfortunately, isn't a planning consideration. That is a matter for the County Council and, I'm pleased to say, for its successor authority from the 1st of April 2028, who I hope will make a much better job of road maintenance than the current lot have done.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Gerson? You're happy for the moment. Councillor French, then?
Thank you, Councillor Borden. As obviously a county councillor, I know you put an awful lot of work in. I drove to this site on Sunday. I haven't been on the 605 for a long time, and I was appalled at the state of the roads. County Council Highway really need to up the game. When I was on County Council, that was my biggest complaint, was the state of our roads. So I hope, as a county councillor, you will pursue, I know it's nothing to do with this application, but the 605 is disgraceful.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor French said, that's not really to do with this application, but she is entirely correct. And yes, we are pursuing matters there, but the danger is if I start talking about that, it becomes party political, and that's not what this is meant to be about.
Quite right. Absolutely. Let's stick to the application. Anyone else at all? Any other comments, questions for Councillor Bowden? No, thank you very much then.
Thank you, Chairman.
So now I'd like to invite Councillor D. Laws, speaking as a Whittlesea Town Councillor, to make her presentation committee. You've got 5 minutes. I understand that you're not too well yourself, so if you take a few more seconds or sort of thing, I'll use that as chairman's discretion to help you. And of course, I'll let Mr. Rice speak at the same time if he goes over in his presentation as well, to be fair. So, you know, that's it.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for that consideration. I'll try and keep this short and sweet, if I may. Good afternoon, members, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this application. I'd firstly like to say I completely endorse the officer's report, and I'm sitting here in support of the application. The officer is to be applauded for his comprehensive and detailed report, clearly demonstrating the amount of work involved with our statutory consultees to bring this outline application forward for a decision today. The proposal in front of Planning Committee members today is a forecast to deliver 1,660 full-time equivalent jobs, 59 million per annum additional wages, 126 million per annum GVA, which is gross value added, uplift for the UK economy. Significant economic benefits not only to Fenland's economy, but also the regional and UK economy. The proposal fits with Fenland District Council economic growth objectives contained within its economic refresh strategy 2025 to 2028. The shared ambition from Cambridgeshire and Peterborough 2050 and the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Local Growth Plan. This fits within Fenland District Council's political strategy, occupying a broad location for growth in Whittlesea identified for employment use. This application achieves net gains in biodiversity. The application will provide public accessibility, open space through a country park. As certain members around this table recall, a facility lost some years ago with the failure of the Sainsbury's out-of-town store, attached retail park and adjacent public country park. Importantly, this is our west to east main gateway into Whittlesea town, with opportunities for a high-level design and visual enhancement to the area. The agent and applicant have presented to Whittlesea Town Council and members were supportive and welcomed the application for our parish. The agent and applicant arranged a public consultation and received positive comments and support. This means a lot to Whittlesea Town Council, as Councillor French has just mentioned, our Southern Relief Road. This is the type of opportunity that will open up the gateways for transport and actually improve our road work. And the other thing I'd like to add is Fenland, as members around this table are aware, it's an ageing, maturing population. This will actually, I feel, encourage younger people to come back and settle in Fenland. We would be then actually developing the houses that are needed for families. So this again would deliver so much for the town, and obviously enhancement of the future with the improvement to the age group coming through. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. Members, questions, clarifications for Councillor Laws. Councillor Gerstner, please, and then Councillor French.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. You just mentioned people coming to Whittlesea to live. Would you not agree that we've already reached almost capacity in land terms to build out any more major developments in Whittlesea as it stands at present?
Through you, Chair. I don't disagree with that fact. In fact, I think Whittlesea has taken the hit for the development through the Fenland area. But having said that, there's larger applications coming through in March and in Wisbech. I don't disagree that in the local plan there is a figure, but that isn't a ceiling. And at the moment we still have several applications in the pipeline that haven't been built out. But again, it's interesting to see. I actually did a survey a few months ago and went round to the local estate agents, and the worrying thing is that people are trying to buy retirement bungalows more than family houses at the moment. But there are several members, I understand, in the community that now are looking to give their children the house and move out to a retirement bungalow. And I think that's where it comes in, that we're worried and concerned. There has to be a more levelling off of the age group in the area. Thank you.
Did you want to come? Any more questions, Councillor Gerstner?
No, I mean the proposed 1,600 or so jobs that may come to Whittlesea over a long period of time. Okay, we all hope that local people will be employed in those jobs, given the fact that it is a science and technology park. Okay, which would require pretty high levels of education and qualifications, I would think, you know. But it is the fact that we have, in Whittlesea, we're a bit constrained on future land to build on, and that's a slight concern. I'm not saying it's against anything, it's just a concern. We don't have large open spaces anymore to build thousands of houses. We're now down to much smaller numbers. Thank you.
Okay, would you like to answer that? Thank you.
Completely understand where Councillor Gerstner is coming from. And yes, we do have land still, appreciate that. And yes, it's still open on several applications that are coming forward that border, I'll put it that way, not only Whittlesea, but border Whittlesea as well. But regarding a science and technology park, the employment would offer a variety. You won't have just degree operating technicians. You will need landscape gardeners. You will need people to actually maintain other aspects of the buildings. Excuse me. Also, there's going to be a restaurant and cafe there. So you're not just focusing on high academic level. This will offer opportunities to a range of people. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's diverse skills. I think that's perhaps what the terminology is. Anybody else at all? Oh, Councillor French, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. As you have a wealth of experience in flooding, middle level, and you sit on many drainage boards, having read this very lengthy report, the biggest concern seems to be Anglia Water and middle level. What's your views on that?
Okay, yeah.
Through you, Chair. I have lots of views on it. But this is at outline stage. And I think this is what members need to be mindful of, because it's in the detail when we go forward. And obviously this proposal, I hope, is successful. Suddenly, this will sound probably quite wrong, but suddenly middle level are taking an interest, which they haven't actually done very much of that previously. So it's good that they've now taken an interest. It's good that they've probably got more staffing support to do that. Yes, it's of concern, and of course we all know with Anglian Water, there's still this problem, the right to connect, which, as we are aware of, this is not going to change. Nothing we can do about that. To whatever systems Anglian Water, have there, the utilities, they will have the right to connect into. But from the middle level perspective, I think this will come down to the actual detail plan.
Okay, did you want to come back at all? No, finished. Anybody else at all? No, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Laws. Now I'd like to invite Sarah Han, Ross Percy-Jones and Robin Green, who are all from Peterborough City Council Highways team, to make their presentation to the committee. You've got 5 minutes between you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to address the committee. To start by introducing ourselves, I'm Sarah Han, Principal Engineer in Highway Development Control Team at Peterborough City Council. With me I have Robin Green, a Senior Engineer within my team, and Ross Percy-Jones, who's a Principal Transport Planner for M Group Highways. Ross's team review the transport assessments and travel plans and provide advice to our team on plan applications. We're here today representing Peterborough City Council's local highway authority, who were consulted on this application as a neighbouring authority. My colleagues and I have reviewed this application to assess the impact of the proposed development on the Peterborough City Council highway network, and due to the lack of information provided as a part of the application, as well as our understanding of the existing highway network within Peterborough, we've had to recommend refusal of the application as it's not been demonstrated it would not result in a severe residual cumulative impact on the highway within Peterborough. We're aware of several junctions and roads in the vicinity of the site which are already near to, at, or over capacity during network peak hours. These are on the main routes anticipated to be used to access the development, which include the A605 Wiltshire Road to Toll Road, the A605 Stanground Bypass, and the Stanground Bypass junction with Fletton Parkway. The trip rates used within the transport assessment rely on there being a modal share of 50% or 60% of car driver trips. However, the census data from 2011 shows that for the existing employment sites in this area, 88% of people who travel from the Peterborough area travel by car, with 74% of the total trips made as a car driver. Whilst this data is now 13 years old, it's the most recent census data available which is not affected by the impacts of COVID, and the public transport, walking and cycling links to the site location have not significantly changed in the intervening period. Therefore, we'd still consider this data to be representative. The Department for Transport Connectivity tool also shows this location to be poorly connected by bus and active travel modes. No assessment of the impact of the development for the 88% existing mode share on the Peterborough network has been carried out, and little information has been provided by the applicant to indicate how it is intended to improve accessibility of the site from Peterborough by non-car modes to achieve the vision of a reduction from 88% to 50% or 60% car trips. It's acknowledged that a shuttle bus is to be provided from Peterborough Station to the site, but this is unlikely to be widely used, as the majority of people travelling from the Peterborough area would then have to travel into town to get the bus to then travel out of town again, and for most people it would actually be quicker and easier to just drive directly to the site. The majority of the trips for this development, 63% of those generated, are expected to travel to, from or through the Peterborough area, and even at a 50% mode share, this would see an increase of 180 trips in the AM peak and 160 trips in the PM peak through these already constrained junctions. Using the trip data from the TA and the current modal share of 88% car trips for this location, there would be an increase in 317 trips in the AM peak and 281 trips in the PM peak as a result of the development. The applicant or the transport consultants indicated that as the development doesn't exceed an 8% increase in vehicle trips through Peterborough junctions, the impact of the development is not significant. The trigger for junction capacity assessments is any junction which receives 30 or more additional two-way trips in a single network peak hour as a result of the proposals, and this is a trigger that applies throughout Peterborough and Cambridgeshire's transport assessment guidelines. Given the previously mentioned issues with the information provided, this application does not fully consider the impact of the proposed development on the Peterborough highway network, and there's been no junction capacity modelling for many of the affected junctions. We acknowledge that Cambridgeshire Highways authorities recommended refusal of the application, but have also provided a possible condition restricting trips from the site to the 50% mode share. If the 50% threshold was applied and restricted by condition, it'd still have that significant increase in trips through the Peterborough network, and as the impact of this on all the affected junctions has not been fully modelled, it's not possible for us to determine appropriate mitigation measures for the impact within our area or what the appropriate level of contribution associated with such a trip cap for our area would be. As a result, we'd respectfully request that committee members either refuse the application due to the severe residual cumulative impact on highway safety and capacity within Peterborough, or defer decision to allow the appropriate assessment of the impacts of the development on Peterborough's network to be carried out and any appropriate mitigation or trip cap and contributions to be determined.
Right, thank you very much. Just in time. Right, members. Like to put questions, clarifications to officers from Peterborough County Council Highways. If you'd like to question, raise your hand. So I'll take Councillor Meakins first and then Councillor Gerstner. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Did you say that the report that a lot of this information is based on is 15 years old? Or did I mishear that?
Sorry, through your chair. The census data or the most recent census data that isn't affected by COVID is 13 years old. Yeah, and that's what we would anticipate being used to assess the modal share across trips to and from a development.
Yeah, again, I apologise if I've misinterpreted what you said, but you seem to be assuming that the people that are going to come and work at this place are all going to be coming from Peterborough. I mean, we've got 3 market towns in Fenland other than Whittlesea, where, especially in Wisbech, where I come from, there's a lot of unemployment, and this would probably offer a way out of those people to get back into work. So if I've misinterpreted what you said about people coming from Peterborough, I do apologise, but I just wonder where that information came from.
Okay. Yeah, so the transport assessment submitted by the applicant indicates that 63% of the trips to and from the site will come from the Peterborough direction, and the remaining trips will come to and from Whittlesea direction. So that's where we've taken the view that the majority of trips will come from Peterborough, because that's what's stated in the TA.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dave. Chairman.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Meekins, Councillor Gerstner, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Where do I start? When the Cardia roundabout was built and the junction for the Milk and Water Road was improved, surely there must have been transport assessments and statistical information gathered on that.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So you're absolutely right. There has been a number of planning applications over, the last 5 to 10 years that have individually looked at these junctions. Obviously, there has been junction improvements, particularly at the Milk and Water Drove junction. What I would highlight here is that those developments have each assessed their own impacts, and there has been significant changes around sort of different development growth assumptions over time. So it's hard to draw a like-for-like comparison between these applications and their assessments. But what I would say is that each one of these applications have been able to, in their own right, been able to justify their impacts in relation to those junctions. I think in relation to this specific application, what we have seen, and there is a neighbouring application site that has actually done the assessment on our network and accounted for this application site, that demonstrates actually cumulatively when you add in all the growth sites together, that's when you start to see an impact at these junctions. So yes, we do acknowledge that the A605 is currently capacity constrained, but not to the extent that we're seeing under these assessments account for this proposed site.
Thank you. Moving on, and there has been a number of planning applications for the Saxon Works in regards to an operator there bringing in IBA, mainly heavy goods traffic. And I'm somewhat surprised when we've flagged this up previously at Cambridgeshire County Council, that Peterborough City Council haven't also flagged this up, because most of that traffic is coming from the Peterborough direction and goes out to the Peterborough direction. There is an impending planning application going through Cambridgeshire County Council at the moment to double the amount of material that that particular applicant is about to do. And I can't see, again, the cumulative, it's okay on this, it's the impact on current application going through and this possible one. And I'd also like to know what type of modelling, if we're relying on statistical information 13 years old, it's a bit subjective. What sort of modelling are we using here, please?
Yep, thank you. What I can reassure you on is that the modelling that's been undertaken by the applicant and its transport consultant, they've used up-to-date survey data. So they've gone out and done traffic surveys in the last, I think the data might be at least a couple of years old now. I think it was 2023 when it was undertaken. So their modelling is based on 2023 traffic flows. The census data that's quoted, that's just to give an indication of the percentage of car driver trips. So what it's indicative, yes, we completely agree that it doesn't give a complete view of what happens now, but it's the closest we've got. And, I think this is a national thing that most authorities have to grapple with in terms of the age of the data that's available. But what I can reassure you is that the junction modelling that's been done is based on current data. You've made reference to the Saxon Brickworks site. Peterborough Highways has actually provided a response on that, and we have asked the same type of assessments of that site as we've done for this one. That applicant has done those assessments, and we had asked that applicant to add in the effect of this particular development proposal. And what we saw with that particular application is that by 2030, without their proposed development with the doubling of HGV traffic, we were already seeing that the Milk and Water Drove junction with the A605 and the immediate roundabout junctions to the west of it would operate at capacity. And from our perspective in Peterborough, is that when you start seeing at capacity conditions on the network, any further increases in traffic delay starts to have a material impact on highway safety. And there's a lot of academic research on this that shows that you will get an increase in accidents on the network as congestion increases.
Thank you. We have to use data now, not in the future. It's all very well saying an accident may happen, but the police and all authorities use data that's happened now, okay? It's all very well, modelling is good in some respects, but it doesn't answer all the questions. I hear where you're coming from. Now, the border from Peterborough City Council and Fenland on the A605 is just past the Horsey Way turning, okay, a little bit further down the road. You've heard before the state of the A605, okay, that's a county council thing, nothing to do here, but I'm just highlighting it again, okay. There has been some good road improvements at Peterborough. I was very pleased to see the Cardia and the Milk and Water Junction improvements there. And it says here that the capacity is not sustainable. Now, I'd like you to go into a little bit more detail, if you don't mind, Chairman, of what you consider to be sustainable and where you get those figures from, please.
Absolutely. So, in terms of sustainable network operation, traditionally, the approach would be that if the traffic volumes exceed 85% of the available capacity on the network, then effectively that's what we would consider to be at capacity conditions. As was noted previously, nowadays we do have to follow a vision validate approach with applications, so therefore we need to work with applicants to identify a preferred vision and see whether that is something that can be achievably delivered. Now, with this site in particular, what we haven't, from a Peterborough perspective, been able to determine is whether that vision can be sustainably delivered, and the emphasis is on sustainability. So we need to be able to we need to see that if there is going to be an impact on the highway network, is there a realistic chance that enough active travel provision or increases in bus services is going to materialise that would help offset that, i.e. reduce the amount of cars that are on the network. What we weren't able to determine from this is that there was going to be sufficient proposals in place to actually achieve that. And so not only do we look at the junction modelling, we also look at the proposals put forward within the transport assessment. And if we find that combined together, we're not seeing a picture that demonstrates that this site could be reasonably accommodated with a vision that aligns with local policy and national policy, then that's when we typically look to say, we would look to recommend to refuse.
Thank you. Finally, you heard me say previously about the state of the A605 and its severe limitations in engineering terms of what could or couldn't be achieved. Now, I'm not a highways expert, I'm not a roadman, I'm an electronics man, okay? Even from the Peterborough side up until the border with, there's no more that can be done on the A605. Do you have any answers or suggestions of what might be done on your side that may help the situation?
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Councillor, that it's a very constrained network in terms of the physical space on the ground to be able to do improvements of any sort. One of the things that we are having to look at now within Peterborough is actually the Stanground bypass itself, and one of the phases of that is only currently a single carriageway, and it is extremely likely, with all the development currently being proposed around that area, that would bring traffic through the A605 and into the Peterborough network, that actually that section of the bypass will need dualling. So we'll need an entire additional carriageway there. In terms of the existing junctions, they obviously dualling the bypass would have a knock-on impact of those junctions, and we'd have to look at how they're designed and whether there's potential improvements for those as well. Unfortunately, it's very early days in terms of looking at that, so I don't have any details of any sort of suggested proposals that we could share at this point.
Okay, sorry to surely Stanground's got a bypass already, because you've got the Cardia roundabout that goes all the way to Amazon.
It does, and it's that bypass that is experiencing capacity issues as a result of the proposed and existing developments in the area, and that's why it will require dualling in the near future.
Thank you. I've finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Purser.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we all know the problems, down the A605 and the lights. I'll be honest, I tried to train as a civil engineer many years ago, but my maths wasn't up to it. So I understand the fact that a lot of the problems there actually come down to the substructure of the actual road itself and the ground underneath it, which obviously through the fens gives way quite easily. However, going back now quite a few years, I used to travel through that area quite a lot, and there used to be the London brickyards and the lights down there, and there was lorries in and out there the whole time when there was dirt and there was noise and there was odours and all the lights there. Obviously, sadly, there's no longer brickworks there for the employment and the lights, but this has now actually been, they're trying to transform it now into offices and laboratories and the lights, which means that obviously the lorries aren't there, and through the presentation that we just saw, it's going to be people with cars, hopefully bikes are walking, so surely that's got to have a much better impact on that road to try and save, not I use the word save it, to be better on that road than the previous things, to give it opportunity to try and repair the road or help it. What's your opinion on that?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'd agree that car trips take up less space on the network than lorry trips would, and that there's always a kind of congestion benefit, I suppose, to removing lorry trips and putting car trips on there. The information submitted as part of the application doesn't have any sort of comparison of the trips between the previous use and the proposed, so it's not something I can really comment on in terms of whether this proposed development would result in a reduction in trips and therefore a benefit, because that comparison hasn't been done.
If I may say so, that's really the comparison I was actually making, really the fact that you just said that you weren't really making a comparison between lorries and the cars, but also we were saying in the presentation there that a lot of the people are trying to encourage bicycles. Now again, somebody riding on a bike going through there is going to have nearly the same impact as having lorries. The lorries were 24/7 going in and out there, where obviously with the cars going to the laboratories and the offices, they're there during office hours, and people on bikes are saying that's really the point I was actually making, that with the bad effects on the 605, it's going to take a little bit of that pressure off it. So hopefully repairs can be done to it that could actually aid it and repair it in the future.
Yeah, I take the point you're making, Councillor. I would say that if lorries are 24/7 and then the proposed use isn't, then you're going to have more trips in the peak hours and at the times where the roads are already very busy, which then has different impacts than the lorries would, but it's still an overall impact on that road.
Thank you for that.
Okay, finished. Anybody else at all? No burning desire, I can't see. Thank you very much for answering some very pertinent questions. I'd now like to invite Stephen Rice. He's the agent to make his presentation to the committee. You've also got 5 minutes, Mr. Rice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Rice, and I'm the planning consultant. After this short presentation, and if permitted by the Chairman, I and James McPherson, our transport consultant who's here with me today, are very happy to answer any questions you may have. Firstly, what is a science park? Well, it's a type of business park with a specific focus on research, development and innovation. The buildings on it are usually specifically designed and purpose-built with bespoke facilities for laboratories, workrooms, offices, meeting areas, and high-grade manufacturing. They can also include recreational facilities, such as gyms and cafes. There's normally a link to a university or an educational body, and the main aim is to facilitate growth for business, entrepreneurs, startups, and collaborative communities. What is true to all of them is that they deliver heightened levels of prosperity for the businesses on them, and this prosperity and wealth gets distributed throughout the region in which they're located. Why are we proposing a science park for the former brickworks? In 2021, I was tasked with designing a scheme for its regeneration. When I started work, it had recently been announced that construction was starting on the new AIU University, University in Peterborough. This was a key factor in my initial evaluation process. I used to work for Bidwells, who manage all of the science parks in Cambridge and Oxford, and some in Oxford, and I've seen firsthand how much more they can offer than a standard business park. I put together a team of specialist consultants. The first company we employed specialises in advising science parks. They were recommended by the UK Science Park Association. They evaluated the site and the proposal and concluded that it had excellent prospects. From day one, the concept was to design a development that was genuinely net zero. This required input from energy specialists, and Vital Energy, the onboard development partner, designed an energy infrastructure that means the development will be self-sufficient in heat and power, and also able to export heat, in particular, generated from the on-site ground and water source heat pumps. The Energy and Innovation Centre on the site could also be used to redistribute waste heat from, say, McCain's to Whittlesea through a local heat network, potentially funded by national government. We also engaged very early on with educational bodies, including the new AIU, Peterborough College, and Cranfield University. Discussions are ongoing. Cranfield in particular is extremely keen to commence research projects on water neutrality and circularity, and energy infrastructure focusing on heat networks and distribution. This is very much in line with national government policy, for which there is significant grant funding available. Cranfield are really keen to apply for this grant funding if outline permission is granted. We're also keen to involve the AIU with these projects. We have heard from Councillor Laws the benefits, or some of the benefits of the science park. I'm just going to touch on a few more. So what else would it provide? 2 hectares of public park immediately next to Whittlesea, an on-site gym and cafe open to the public, a shuttle bus. We haven't heard much about this today. The shuttle bus is key to this. A shuttle bus from the site to Peterborough Station and possibly Whittlesea Station. Circular cycle footpaths around the site. New pedestrian cycle path from the site to Snoots Road, Whittlesea, and new control crossings on the A605 for pedestrians and cyclists. Now, I'm very conscious that despite extensive discussions and the provision of evidence-based modelling demonstrating how the development can deliver the sustainable transport modes confirmed in the transport assessment, that we've not been able to satisfy Cambridgeshire County Council Highway team. There is further work to do, and we're very confident that our transport plan will work. However, we have agreed to the principle of a Section 106 legal agreement that requires delivery of new sustainable transport infrastructure, off-site parking control, and also substantial financial payments to the council if the sustainable transport targets are not met. Having grown up in Rutland, I'm very familiar with Fenland and Whittlesea, and I'm convinced that the town and region deserve a development like this. During this journey, I've heard it suggested that it won't provide jobs for Whittlesea or Fenland. I don't agree with this attitude. Firstly, of the predicted 1,650 new jobs, about 30% are likely to be for high qualified scientists. The rest will be for support staff across a whole range of disciplines, including admin, media, property, ground maintenance, hospitality. But don't lose the sight of that 30% scientists and technical specialists. This is an aspirational development. Not only would it offer employment opportunities for existing Fenland residents, it's the future I'm thinking of. It's the next generation who can aspire to work in science and technology, get the grades at school.
Mr. Rice, could you just quickly wrap up your presentation? Just this sentence,
Two
please.
seconds. Go to university and build a successful, prosperous future for themselves, their families, and their region. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So, members, goodness me, Councillor Gersten, how surprising. Thank you. Then Councillor Frank.
Can you switch your microphone off, Mr. Rice, please? I will have 7 questions written here down for you, and I'm going to make a start now.
Councillor Gersten, before you start, do you want to do 2 or 3 first, then bring Councillor French
Yes,
in?
no, that's fine.
And then you finish
Thank
off
you.
as
I
well.
thought I'd give advance notice. Thank you. Thank you.
I think perhaps that's the best way forward, so carry on when you're ready. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for attending today and providing the committee with an update on the latest developments regarding this application. It is important to clarify that contrary to some Whittlesea town councillors suggesting that there was no public consultation had taken place, I would like to correct that statement that there had been and has been public consultation, not only with the public, but with Whittlesea Town Council. The public consultation took place in December 2023 and the Town Council subsequently. Before asking any questions, I would like to state what a wonderful opportunity we have before us today at this planning committee to help change not only Whittlesea, but the surrounding area, as Mr. Rice has just said, for generations to come. My question number 1 is, should the committee be minded to grant outline planning application committed to access and outline, would you be prepared to confirm that the proposed 37 draft conditions contained within the report can be met?
Yes, please.
I have been through the draft conditions in detail with the officer. I would like to say, actually just at this moment in time, that we had a planning performance agreement with Fenland regarding this development because of its size and scale and complexity. And I have to say, it's been an absolute joy to work with the planning team on this application. I've been in the planning game 35 years and do lots of complex, large-scale applications, and this is how planning should work, in my opinion. It's been an excellent experience. It's taken a long time. This application's been in for a year now, but you would expect that with something as complex as this. So yeah, we've had to deal with an awful lot of stuff as we've gone through the determination process, provided a lot more information, and we've ended up with 37 draft conditions that I am satisfied to sign up to, yes.
Thank you. Question number 2. Would there be a plan should the Ralph Butcher Causeway be restricted in traffic flow, as there has been the case for the last 12 months? Hopefully, the present issues will be resolved, but there is no guarantee of that. And I'm asking, would there be later on a plan that may help mitigate that closure of that?
It's a transport question, and I would normally pass that over to James, but because I'm very familiar with the site and the problems with the causeway, I'll probably answer that myself. Firstly, this is a phased development, and I think realistically, it would be silly of me to try to pretend that this is all going to happen overnight. I mean, if this is built out as envisaged, this will be the 3rd largest science park in the UK. It's a serious development. This is. I need to make that clear to everybody here. This is a fantastic proposition, and it will be built out in phases. So realistically, I don't see, everybody's assessing on what this transport issue is going to be. There's not going to be a transport issue overnight, and we could be talking about 15 years' time by the time this fully is built out. In 15 years' time, who knows what the transport situation is going to be? And sustainable transport modes are going to be far more prevalent in 15 years' time. I can guarantee that. The use of the car will definitely not be as prevalent as it is now, because I think it'll have been taxed off the roads to a certain extent as well. So it's difficult for me to answer that really, Roy, because the answer is none of us who know Whittlesea and come here regularly you can't contemplate them not solving that problem with that causeway. It's just, you can't contemplate it, because they'd have to take a step back and open the crossing again. Or whether or not that might hopefully bring pressure on the Southern Relief Road and take some of that freight off it. I mean, that might be, I mean, weight limit on it, you know.
Thank you. If I may ask another question, please. Third question.
So that's the third one, then we'll Councillor French.
So you partially mentioned in your presentation, because this wasn't actually in the paperwork, that the proposed bus service currently in the plan exclusively runs from the site to Peterborough, raising the questions of its limited route operations. And notably, there would be no offer of a route that includes Whittlesea. Now, you just mentioned Whittlesea in there, which could be a significant omission in considering the potential demand for transport from our own area of Whittlesea. Would you readdress that, and would you consider the bus route actually coming from the Whittlesea town centre and also serving the Science Park and Peterborough?
The proposal at the moment is that it would be focused on Peterborough, primarily because it's going to be more difficult to persuade people to get off a train in Peterborough and get using a cycle to get to the site. That's going to be more of a challenge to persuade people to do it. There are ways and means. Milton Park, an existing very, very successful science park, which operates just near Didcot in Oxfordshire, has been the model that I've used, because I've got to know the operators of that site very well. And they operate an amazing sustainable transport. They're actually running the first autonomous buses in the UK between Oxford and the park. With Whittlesea Station, we're much keener to try to work out how to get people from Whittlesea Station to the site using walking and cycling as a mode, rather than using, and therefore, if there was money to be spent, I would prefer to evaluate how you could spend that on a cycle route and improvements in a cycle route from the station to the site, before immediately spending money on a bus service, which is going to shuttle people from the station. But to be fair, the company FIFO, who we've spoken to, and we've already got completely costed proposals for this shuttle bus service, and we know, and we did provide the costed proposal to Cambridgeshire County Council to sort of bench test it, and they did comment that it looked realistic in terms of the costings. And we will charge for parking on the site. So there will be a nominal charge for parking a car on the site to dissuade people from bringing a car. There will be a nominal charge for parking your site for a car on the site to try to dissuade people from using a car. But in terms of the shuttle bus service to Whittlesea Station, yes, it's been talked about with the company, and it could be factored in. But I think we'd prefer to first of all look at seeing whether or not you could improve the sustainable transport routes between there, because it's not very far.
Thank you for that, Mr. Rice, and I'll come back to the cycle and walkway at another question. So thank you, Chairman.
We shall look forward to the other questions, but in the meantime, Councillor French.
Thank you, Chairman. I know it's early stages yet and it's only outline, but have you any end users in mind?
So Richard Collins from EIBC, which was the company that I mentioned, the specialists in science parks, who we took on from day one. Richard and I worked closely on this for now 3 years. Richard's specialism is in science parks, and he's an economics specialist. He has drawn up a list of companies, both local and slightly more wider in the district. We were staggered how many high-tech businesses there are already in this region. It's quite amazing when you actually start to look at it in depth. And all of them are potential targets. Realistically, we've spoken to businesses, but until you get a planning permission, you're wasting your time. They're not really going to talk to you very seriously because at the moment it's just pie in the sky. It may or may not happen. It hasn't even got planning permission. Realistically, and there's no doubt about this now, if outline planning permission is granted for this site, I've already spoken to a lot of politicians in the region and the CPCA and the ARU and the Cranfield. And the only way a site like this is ever going to be successful is if all of the interested parties who have a vested interest in seeing something like this work come together. Science parks don't just, somebody doesn't just say, oh, we want a science park here and there's going to be a science park there. If you actually look at the genetics of a science park and how they come about, it requires commitment from everybody. It requires commitment from the local politicians, leaders in the region to attract businesses, to persuade businesses that they need to come there. You've got to find employees. I mean, that's a really serious factor. You've got to demonstrate to businesses that want to come here that there are employees. You've got to have certain services and facilities to persuade international companies. If you want to attract an international company, they've got to go into the town and they've got to find restaurants that their employees can get. They've got to have, this is why we factored in the gym and the cafe on site, because you've got to provide a certain basic level of attractiveness to these businesses and particularly international businesses. So we are, from day one I engaged with the CPCA because they are one of the first ports of call from government. So companies that are looking for sites approach government. Government filter that down through into the regions, and the CPCA is one of the bodies that ends up with that database of businesses. So all of them have been telling me all the time that I've been talking to them and banging on their doors that we have to get planning permission first, otherwise nobody's really going to want to talk seriously to us. So the answer is yes, we've done an awful lot of background work, we've spoken to businesses, we've got some in mind we think this would be fantastic for, but we can't really take it forward until we've got an outline planning permission.
If I can just ask another one, please. Can you explain to me what a mobility hub is or is going to be?
That sounds like one for me. So mobility hubs, it's a focal point where the shuttle bus could come in and people could catch it, future employees of the site. It's a place where people could hire or park their bikes that have cycled to work. It's a hub potentially where the cafe can be. It's also a place where, for those that do actually drive to the site as well, would park their car. So it's really a centralised hub that primarily is trying to provide opportunities for sustainable travel, but it's a building in itself that has other uses as well.
Let me just come in on there. So I spent quite a bit of time travelling around Europe, and mobility hubs in Europe are far more prevalent than you see them in this country. So some of the things that would feature in the mobility hub is there will be a cycle shop, cycle repair, there'll be showers, free repair for your bike, little bike repair stations will part of the hub and also dotted around the site. Again, Milton Park is a great example of what they do to encourage this sustainable modes of transport, and simple things like the mobility hub, and James has mentioned the cafe and things linked to it, the free breakfasts of people who cycle a certain number of times a month. All these sort of things are done to encourage people to use their bike rather than the car, and that's all directed through the mobility hub.
So I think I'll come in there, then I'll bring Councillor Gerson in. Right, so you mentioned getting people on board. So the CPC, Cranfield Institute, businesses, you've knocked on their doors. Say there's a break there and one of them, the businesses don't really want to come, they don't want to come to Whittlesea, they're happy where they are, the CA don't back it, or Cranfield don't take much interest in it. how certain are you this will go ahead? Because it seems to me that you're relying on everybody else to come here and say some joined up thinking. It's not going to be as easy as perhaps you perceive it to be. Talking is one thing, actually moving and getting everybody on board, getting joined up thing is perhaps a little bit more difficult.
It is difficult. I'm not going to shy away from the fact that it's incredibly difficult to bring a project like this to successful fruition, and this is just part of the journey. Getting an outline planning permission. So this has been 4 years in the making now, just to get to this point. These sorts of developments really, and this is what I must stress, don't happen overnight. And if it did happen overnight, the chances are its longevity and its successfulness wouldn't be there, because it wouldn't have been built and designed for that long-term sustainable success. So I've seen this with other sites, and sometimes the amount of time they can take to get to that point where you feel as if they've made a meaningful difference can be frustrating. And I don't want to sort of shy away from that. Nobody here should think that this is all going to happen overnight, even if planning permission was granted. All I can say is that there's an awful lot gone on behind the scenes in that 4 years with the discussions. Cranfield in particular are champing at the bit, and I've had to stop them. So I've had a couple of incredibly learned professors chasing me because they want to put grant funding packages together for research projects based around the energy and water in particular. And feel free, I've heard some talk about water here and about the IDB, and I've heard them just come back in again today. And this site, one of the people who've been part of our team is a guy called Tom Stevenson, Professor Tom Stevenson, known in the UK and globally as Professor Water. And he's been advising us. He's ex-Cranfield. And he is of the opinion that actually, as well as the energy side, this should be a water-based science park because of the uniqueness of this park. So none of the surface water can leave this site until a pump is switched on. So it's completely unique in my experience of all my years of development. The only way the water gets into the King's Dyke is if a pump is switched on to pump it there. So if you choose not to switch the pump on, you retain all of your water on the site and it doesn't go anywhere else. It might flood down into Saxon Pit and flood Johnson's down the bottom, but it certainly wouldn't go anywhere else unless you choose it to. So that's where the concept of water neutrality, which is actually reusing all of your on-site surface water, comes in. And this has been designed with a surface water drainage system with exactly that in mind, and that it's all directed back to the lake, which has got a freeboard. For those of you who don't know it, it's the difference between the water level and the top of the bank of about 1.5 meters at the moment, which means it's got an attenuation capacity. It's vast, so you can hold so much water on site. And if you've got that water, you might as well use it. So the concept is that ultimately it'll be treating its own water. And it will be circulating and reusing all of this water. Now that's water neutrality. You then go to the next stage, which is water circularity, which is the foul and everything all gets reused and recycled on the site. And they're really keen at Cranfield to get going on this and start research and get government funded research on this, because this could become a blueprint for commercial developments here in the East. Because you're already aware at the moment, if a commercial business comes here in Anglian Waters region and wants to set up business, it can't have any water and it can't discharge any foul. How the hell are we going to attract any business? It's mind-boggling. So this could potentially, I get quite excited about this because I don't know where this could go, but it does have legs. This site could actually provide a blueprint for commercial development of water circularity here in the East. And Cranfield are really excited about it. They want to get going on this and they want to apply for this grant funding. There's masses of grant funding for this through Ofwat from government if you know how to tap into it. And Cranfield are experts at it, doing it. So the answer is yes, it's complex, yes, it's difficult, but we've got a lot of fingers in pies that are just waiting for one decision, and that's the planning.
So just one more question, a follow on from there then. So I can tell you're pretty excited about this. So if the best case scenario occurs, when is your expected time? Best case scenario, we don't want to talk about the worst case scenario, do we? Because it won't get built. But the best case scenario says, when will you be looking to put diggers on the ground? In roughly what year? Best case scenario.
I'd say 2027, realistically, by the time reserve matters are dealt with, and we've got some issues to deal with regard to highways, and not so much with water, because we did manage to get Anglian Water to agree to supply a water supply. So initially they said they wouldn't, but then they did agree to supply fresh water to the site. But obviously drainage, foul drainage, for any form of development on the site would have to be dealt with. I think it's doable, but I would say realistically 2027, because the first thing we're going to have to do is put the new access in off the roundabout, and without a doubt, a Section 278 process, I'd take a good stab and say currently 18 months to 2 years to get that agreed.
So roughly 2 years. Thank you very much. Councillor Gerstner, the floor is again yours.
Thank you. Turning to the subject of land contamination, this will be considered naturally later stage if this application is granted. Now, I'm talking about the site now, and having lived in the area less than 2 kilometres away from the site for over 50 years, I'm very versed of the site. Historically, there has been issues with land contamination. Has any survey work been carried out on this particular part of the application in respect of land contamination?
Easily answered, Roy, yes. It was the first report I commissioned on the Victory site, and we did a full stage 3 contamination assessment, deep boreholes, 20 metres deep, straight through Victory, clear, completely clear. There used to be another pit next to the lake, which concerned me because I didn't know what was in it. I was told what was in it from the shaler, the guy who used to dry the shaler, Clary, but that didn't mean to say I had to believe him. And he told me it was overburden from Star Pit that came across the railway line and went into this pit to fill it in, and he was right. So SLR, first thing they did, contamination risk assessment of virtually the whole of the Victory works, from the lake all the way back to the Ralph Butcher. That's all been done.
Thank you. I've met that shaler man as well. And confirming that with me, please. I'm going to try to put 2 questions into one here. I presume in consultation with Cambridgeshire Highways, the concerns and issues regarding the A605, including traffic volumes and the availability of cycle and pedestrian facilities, this will be properly addressed. The site is not suitable for access for either walking or cycling from Whittlesea or Peterborough. Has consideration been given to joining and accessing cycle route 63, which can be reached via Funtum's Lane, near McCain's? The pathway on the northern side of the A605, and I would challenge anybody in this room to walk down it or go in it on a mobility scooter or push a pram along it. It is almost mountainous, the state of that pathway. It's in a very poor state of repair and is very challenging to pedestrians. Can you make a commitment in perhaps looking at this and improving that particular pathway, which would open up a route to the cycleway, Route 63?
I'm going to come to James in a minute, but let me answer that first, because I'm very, very familiar with that site, and particularly Funtum's Lane. So certainly Funtum's Lane, we've engaged with McCain's very heavily during this application, so have our energy consultants, particularly with talking to them about potentially reusing heat from McCain's. Unfortunately, the strip of land down Funtom's Lane that we would require to put a cycleway down it to get to 63 is owned by the other industrial operator, Forterra, and they've singularly failed to engage with us, even though I've tried every single way possible. I don't know why. Which is a great shame, because my first plan was to put a cycleway down there. And I failed because I couldn't get Forterra. I then tried to see whether we could put one straight across Forterra's through their restored area, but they wouldn't have that either. So at the moment, that's why we have to go down Crossway Hand and link up to it there, and then go around past the football ground or football club. In terms of improving the footway, I'll hand over to James.
I think there were two parts to the question in terms of the 605 and traffic as well. I think the first point I'd make is that transport planning policy now compels us to be visionary. It's in the revised NPPF. From the very start of this, we've wanted to focus on the movement of people, not just drilling down into cars. If you build bigger roads, it will ultimately get filled with cars and car-dominated behaviour. And so we don't want to sort of predict future demand based on historic traffic trends anyway. So we are looking to the future, we're looking to the movement of people. So in terms of the cycle and pedestrian connections, what we have looked at is a connection through the site to come out onto the A605. We have looked at a toucan crossing, so a controlled crossing to cross people to the northern side of the A605, and then to join those into Crossway Hands to then go up towards the off carriageway cycle connection that you're referring to there. And then in terms back into Whittlesea, yes, there are constraints there in terms of what is achievable in terms of improvements for cyclists. But we've carried that along as far as Snoops Road, and then that's where cyclists would rejoin sort of the carriageway there. But it's absolutely part of our strategy that we are trying to think about how we can move people by sustainable modes. We have put in all the transport work the mode share target of car drivers at 50%, and we've done a lot of work to show how that could be achieved through not only active travel, but shared and public transport as well via the shuttle bus, which Stephen has earlier referred to.
Thank you. For committee members that are not aware, we have a cycle route 63 that goes from Stonald Road in Whittlesea all the way to Peterborough, and it's a lovely cycle and walk route that is bad in some places, but 80% of it is very good. And the concern is, again, the Crossway Hand junction is already surcharged already to try and come in and out of that junction. Of course, there's an HGV company just further down the road. They may not be here in a few years' time. They've already been sold. But that is a small junction and a small road, and again, it has very limited ability and capacity to take traffic. But I'll come back to you about, I'll challenge you on this. In all my time, and I've travelled up and down that road for a long time, we used to have a lot of cyclists on that road when the brickworks were at full capacity. But I doubt very much you'll see many cyclists on that road now because of the volume of traffic and how dangerously it is to cyclists. It's a single carriageway with lorries passing each other each way. There is no room for cyclists, unfortunately.
Yeah, if I may, just a couple of points there. As Stephen has just said, yeah, we agree, and we're not hanging our whole strategy and trying to say that everybody will cycle to this site. We're not trying to say that nobody will drive their car to this site either. What we're trying to do is present an evidence-based, sustainable strategy, looking at it in the round, looking at various different options of how people can travel to and from the site. A lot of that is based on public transport in terms of the shuttle bus, as I said. In terms of the junction, the Crossway Hands junction that you just referred to there. So again, we've looked at the options for that extensively in terms of design, in line with Local Transport Note 120, which is looking at cycle infrastructure design and how we can sort of safely integrate cyclists with vehicles, acknowledging the HGV company that you're referring to there. So we have done swept path analysis, looking at the largest vehicle types that would have to access Crossway Hands, and to check that, you know, all the different users could be accommodated, and that has been subject to an independent stage 1 road safety audit as well.
Just quickly, let me just remind you, you can access the site coming out of Whittlesea at the Crossway Hand. We come into the site, should you choose to, and we would perfectly encourage it because the whole site's open for public access. There's then a perfectly good cycleway that takes you through the site, through the science park, and back out the other end. If you wanted to cycle from one end of the 605 up to the McCain's end, you could do so through the site rather than use the 605.
Could I just add one final point? Again, just to re-emphasise our overall sort of mode share, and that we're not suggesting that an inordinate amount of people would cycle the site. Of course, we will encourage that and we'd love it to happen. In our overall sort of mode share, we're suggesting just under 10% of overall employees at the site could potentially have the opportunity to cycle. And even though we're not looking back historically, that's not a dissimilar level to what is shown in the census data back in 2011.
Thank you for that. 10% of 1,600 in my simple maths is 160. So I'm sorry, I think you're being somewhat ambitious. I've got no problem with being ambitious, but I think you're being somewhat ambitious on that number. I'd like to move on to the next question, please.
Could I ask you now, Councillor, how many more questions have you got left? Two. Okay, and then I'll bring Councillor Meekins in. Thank you.
Thank you. These are simple questions. Huge changes have been made, as you quite rightly said, that this is a living document, it's ongoing, you've been at it for a very long while, and huge changes have been made in the application from its original concept. Are you going to consider doing another public consultation should outline planning be given? And my second question is, which I'll add on to it, you've not mentioned any data centre for the science park, and with all that lovely water being there for cooling purposes, is that an option, please?
In terms of further public consultation, I'd be interested to know what you had in mind. So quite happy to talk about that, because if there was a valid reason for it and it was going to achieve something, then you know me, I would never say no. But in terms of data centres, I'm not inclined to say over my dead body, but my whole concept of this is for it to provide employment. And my client's been approached by people who want to put all sorts of other things on that site over the years. He's owned it, and they all get run past me to start with. Data centres are one, and if that went to data centres, it'd employ about 10 people. I don't want to see that. I don't live in Whittlesea. I don't want to see that. Why would you want to see that? It's got water, and we know we can put the power there. So yeah, that would seem such a waste of a fantastic site. I wouldn't want to see it, Roy. The answer is yes. There will be data on the site, and the energy infrastructure is designed. I won't bore you with details of it now, but the vital energy infrastructure that they've designed for this site is, again, it could be a blueprint, but it shares heat and cooling, because we've got massive amounts of cooling, so it's fantastic for. It means that there's no air conditioning required on the site. Again, so you hit the net zero. So all the computer banks and everything else on the site, which there will be, are all cooled from the lake. So it's you know, but no, I wouldn't want to see data centres there. no one, data centres, distribution centres, all those sort of things. I've always said no, don't want to see it.
Okay, Mr. Rice, thank you for answering all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goughton. We'll bring in Councillor Meekins. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. You said earlier on, I think, that you've got previous experience with science parks. Is that correct?
I was a partner at Bidwell's for 13 years. I wasn't directly involved with the science parks, but they were a fundamental part of our partnership business. So I was very well aware of what went on with them, yes.
Right. So my actual question is, we're getting a bit caught up, I think, in the fact that the 1,600 jobs we believe going to be in this place. And I wonder whether we're just getting caught up with the fact that it says there's office accommodation there. I mean, I don't know anything about science parks, sort of the detail, but are they 9 to 5 jobs, or are they sort of open-ended where people go in at all hours to do their research and everything?
I think I would describe science parks as probably the most enlightened places you'll go to in terms of employment. They're totally flexible in terms of working hours. It depends on the type of research going on the science park as to whether or not there are some people there that treat it as a 9 to 5 employment job. There are other people who will be splitting it between going in, working partly on the site, working at home. With home working, I think science parks have probably always had an element of home working more so than most, even pre-COVID. A bit like my business. We've operated our whole business by working from home long time before COVID, because the technology, they're users of technology. So you'll find that they have very flexible working hours. Yes, you do get peak times, particularly in Cambridge, at the Cambridge Science Park, and also at Milton Park, which are the two that I'm most familiar with. But it depends on what's being done, really. It depends on whether or not... I've always said that this science park shouldn't be focused on what we call life sciences and wet labs. So you'll hear a lot of discussion about that with regards to particularly Cambridge, which is the home of life sciences and wet labs. But then you've also got AstraZeneca's head office, the £5 billion building that got completed about 3 years ago in Cambridge, which is just offices. So it's a mix, and that's why if the planning officer is able to book the mix back up, you'll see that we've built it up out of a mix of different types of uses, which is our best guess in terms of how it's. But it's been designed slightly for that. There's 3 buildings in particular that we've targeted more towards advanced manufacturing, and ARU are really pleased that we've designed it with some advanced manufacturing, because that's their focus. That's where they see, if they see some involvement, it would be along an advanced manufacturing front rather than necessarily research.
Thank you very much.
You finished? Yep. So this has been some, thank you very much for answering these questions. I can't see any more. I shall close this in a minute. No one? No, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, members, do you want to take 10 minutes now? I think we need to, really. We've nearly been going 2 hours. And I respectfully ask you to be back for 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. Thank you, members. Thank you, everybody, for being back promptly. Much appreciated. Now I'd like to invite members to put questions to officers, and I would like to advise members that there are also an officer or two from Cambridgeshire County Council Highways team to answer questions, and one and one, that's definitely two. Thank you. Questions to officers, members? I see you. Radio, off you go, Councillor Gerstner. Thank you.
Question number one. There has been a consultation period. However, one consultee was missed out. Does this have any bearing on what can or can't be achieved today, given they've been given extra time to answer their that particular one consultee? I know it's only one, but...
Yes, there was one resident that was missed off of the original consultation, which is unfortunate. So we've sought to remedy that by obviously issuing a 21-day consultation letter to them, which is what we're statutorily obliged to do. That expires, I believe, middle of next week. We've not received comments from that individual yet. Obviously, the recommendation there is, as set out in the report, is to have regard to any material matters that may arise post resolution here. And that is obviously technically irrespective of whether that particular resident comments or not. We have a legal duty before we issue a planning refusal or permission to take into account all material considerations that sit with us. So if that resident raises a material consideration that is considered that hasn't already been considered in this report, the recommendation there is to discuss that with the chair of committee to see whether or not that would then need to come back to the committee. Alternatively, if there are no comments that are if there are comments raised that are not materially different to what we've already considered in the report, then it's considered that they've already been considered, and therefore to proceed on that basis.
Thank you for that. Question number two. Difficult. Given the objections, both in the application from various authorities, whether it be from Peterborough City Council Highways or be it from Cambridgeshire County Council Highways, and taking note of Councillor Bowden's presentation that maybe they're using the wrong model, which I wasn't aware of, but I have to now take that into account as well. So maybe their information is not quite correct, and we've got somebody here that can answer that later. Okay. Going back to our own officers, Travel England have said here that the A605 is not conducive to cycling or walking, that the state of the A605 is in a poor condition. The adjacent road is not conducive to active travel, and it says 40 miles an hour, but I can assure you there's 5 different speed limits along that road that go 30, 40, 30, 40, 30, 40, okay? And given Anglia Water, the issue with the possibility of wastewater being dealt with, okay? There's a lot of things going on here, and I want to know how you've weighed that up to give us, the planning committee, a recommendation to approve. I want to know how you've achieved and come to that decision, please.
Yes, thank you. So through you, Chair. So obviously in terms of the process, there is always a planning balance to apply to most applications when determining it. That's our requirement, that's what we do, that's our job. And obviously the planning balance on this occasion is set out in the report at section 11 in terms of weighing those benefits and disbenefits of the scheme. I think in terms of, going back to perhaps some of the outstanding matters, drainage being one, water supply, etc. The framework, National Planning Policy Framework and the guidance sets out that where we consider we can make development acceptable in planning terms through conditions or obligations, then that's what we should be doing. And obviously in this occasion it's deemed appropriate to apply planning conditions to ensure that we have satisfactory schemes coming forward to support this development. There's no reason why we can't secure that through planning condition. And indeed, we've obviously gone back to, for example, the Environment Agency and even this morning, middle level commissioners to say, well, look, we've set out these conditions, are they satisfactory? And they've responded obviously relatively positively, albeit I'm sure they'd all like their detail up front, but this is an outline application which we need to be mindful of. So in terms of some of those outstanding matters, in terms of drainage, etc., there are reasonable conditions that can be imposed to secure that, and we do that quite often with a number of applications, particularly the larger ones, asking for site-wide strategies in that regard. I think in terms of the transport elements, as you say, perhaps we'll speak to colleagues in the transport team shortly, but in terms of the balance for those transport impacts in particular, that is set out in terms of section 11 of the report. I think we are mindful that the site is constrained. It's limited in terms of its scope as to what could be reasonably and viably achieved through this scheme. Obviously, the ideal would be there would be a continuous cycle footway connecting Whittlesea to Ramsey to Peterborough to March. There just isn't. That's not how, unfortunately, how these settlements have evolved. So what the applicant has chosen to do is obviously look at what reasonable opportunities can be achieved through sustainable transport modes, active travel modes. They've put forward a package which officers consider is, it's not going to alleviate the transport impacts, and that's quite clear and set out in the report. There is going to be cumulative impacts of transport on the highway. But what it aims to achieve, obviously, is to limit that through its vision, and through working through with the transport team. There are obligations that's going to be sought through the Section 106 as essentially a penalty if the active travel movements and modal share aren't achieved. There'll be a penalty, financial penalty for the applicant to pay towards highway improvements that may then either alleviate some of the transport impacts or improve and encourage non-car modes of travel. But I think it is acknowledged that there's no magic fix to this. There's no silver bullet to sort of overcoming some of the transport impacts that this development is likely to incur. But obviously we balance that against the benefits of the scheme, and they're clearly set out in section 11 of the report: economic growth, employment opportunities, biodiversity net gain above the statutory 10%, as well as obviously public park community areas that can be utilised by the public. So all these things feed into the benefits outweighing those disbenefits, and that's how officers have come to that conclusion.
Planning balance, that's what it's called.
Thank you for that. I'll carry on from that. I mean, I'll reiterate what I said to the agent. It's a wonderful opportunity that we have before us, and we mustn't miss this opportunity. However, I'm sorry to labour on questions. The AC, I don't think you've given enough weight to the A605. We've heard from Peterborough City Council their presentation and their constraints and restrictions and their ability to address issues on the A605. Somewhere in the statement it says that the active transport England requires evidence of firm commitment around the provision of enhanced service in the area. Currently, the application does not include part of this enhanced transport system. We've heard from the applicant about bus. Now, I'll say I'm a simple man in maths, not really. 1,600 jobs, they're expecting 10% cyclists on a road that is not conducive to cyclists or walking, okay? Active Transport England are not supporting in its current form. And my question is that this needs to be readdressed. It's all very well saying, well, we can look at it in reserved matters, but we're looking at it, what's on the table today. See? And I find it slightly unnerving, but there's not enough weight being given. And we'll go back to Cambridgeshire Highways when we get the opportunity as to the cumulative effects, serious cumulative effects of the A605.
Sorry, Chair, was there a question there? Could I just ask? Sorry.
Well, in your own inimitable way, Councillor Gerstner. So you haven't got any more questions for officers then? Anybody else? Yes, Councillor French, thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question. You've got lots of conditions. Condition 2, application for approval of the reserved matter shall be made to local planning authority before the expiration of 5 years. Is that a mistake? 5 years? You're not going to be here in 5 years.
Through you, Chair, I mean, I certainly hope to be here in 5 years on this planet in any way, shape or form. But I think, obviously, you know, this is an application in front of members to consider. And obviously it's in their gift if they wish to look at conditions and, you know, amend if they wish, they can do so. I think we set out 5 years as a sort of a requirement to deliver reserved matters because this is a long-term project. I think the agent has already set that out, and ultimately, if after 5 years we don't have those reserved matters in, the element of that permission is gone. So, but is it realistic to ask for 2 or 3 years for reserved matters to be submitted for a scheme of this scale, particularly given the timings the agent has set out in terms of sort of gaining interest, let alone design, etc. So it's a case of trying to sort of balance that.
Through you, Chairman, just for clarity, and I think what Councillor Fridge might have been alluding to, obviously, the condition relates to local planning authority. So, irrespective of whether it's Fenland District Council or another council, that will still be the local planning authority. So, it will still be submitted to whatever one deals with that.
Okay, that's cleared that one up then. Any more questions, clarifications to officers at all? Don't forget, we've got the highways. I'm putting those into the equation for officers. So any questions for dedicated to Camps Highways? And you've got one. Thank you, Councillor Gerstner.
I hope you heard the presentation given by Councillor County Councillor Bowden. Can you enlighten the committee, please, on where you base your information from, how, and why aren't you using the latest data and information, please?
So the modelling submitted, the modelling that we have assessed is the modelling that's been submitted by the applicant. And that the assumptions within that model use up-to-date traffic counts, so not out-of-date traffic counts, and it used industry standard software to assess the impact. So the model is not out of date, it's very much up to date. I think in terms of census data, I think obviously census is only undertaken once every 10 years, where it is a little bit limited. It's unfortunate that the last census was in the middle of COVID, so nobody uses that because it's not representative, and therefore we're left with 2011 census data to determine how people travel around in Whittlesea. So I hope that answers your question.
Sorry. Do you want to come back, Councillor Gerstner? Sorry.
Apologies. I just thought I'd also just give you a bit of the bigger picture. I've heard it said a couple of times this committee that we don't use the vision and validate model. We do, especially where networks are constrained. I think our challenge is that someone's got a vision, I've got a vision, but is it reasonable? And I think the challenge here that we are saying is, well, yes, we like vision, we want people to do things, but is it actually reasonable given what we know? As a resident of Peterborough for 20 years, I know the cycling habits of Peterboreans. Within the city, people will walk and people will cycle. As soon as you get outside the sort of the parkway system, it's less likely. So in terms of that vision, we're not convinced, and I think another councillor has alluded to this, that you're going to get a lot of walking and cycling because of the A605 and even the path alongside the river. Lovely in the summer, I've cycled it, not so great in the winter when it's dark. So what that leaves us with is passenger transport. We could look at that. Well, at the moment, all we've got that's being proposed is one bus from the station. I suppose I would question why the station. It might pick up some people on the train from Huntingdon, but I think there's a bigger picture, and I believe another councillor said, well, why wouldn't people come from March, other places? That bus won't help them. So I think there's a bigger passenger transport suite of measures that's required here, and I don't think that work's been carried out to work out what that might be. Now, as a result of this is why we've said we'd like a trip cap, because we're not convinced that the mode share will go down to 50%. That's kind of Cambridge stuff, 50%. Cambridge's got park and rides, got cycleways everywhere. Out here, not so much. As I said, being a resident of Peterborough, having worked for Peterborough City Council, I've looked at the background on this quite significantly. So I feel that passenger transport is the way forward, but I just don't feel that one bus from a station is going to do it. There might be opportunity to look at works buses from other areas, but simply speaking, that just hasn't happened. So we're not against the vision of Validate. We just have the feeling in this case that that vision, with the information we currently have, isn't achievable at this point in time.
Okay. Did you want to come back?
Thank you. Thank you. Going back, it's just so important, the A605. I cannot, push it further. In part of the presentation, it said that the current proposals for Crossway Hand Junction remains unacceptable. The revised design incorporates several positive amendments to partially address the concerns. Later on, it says the variation in design could be deliverable, but would likely resolve its principal concerns. Therefore, on balance, the Local Highways Authority feels it is now in a position whereby it can seek a planning condition to secure delivery of appropriate pedestrian and cycle mitigations at this junction. We're talking about Crossway Hand. I presume you've not done a desktop modelling on this, on that junction, that somebody's actually been there and seen it, and seen the HGVs coming out, and the display of the road, and what could be, and I would say, what can't be achievable at that junction. So have you got any answers on that junction, please?
I'll take that one, because that was my response. In terms of that junction, as you say, it is quite constrained. There are HGV movements related to the business up there, as you've alluded to. Whether they continue long term, I'm not sure. The modelling or the design that's been undertaken by the applicant, as they alluded to in their comments, that has been through a road safety audit independently, has assessed whether that junction would flag up any safety issues that need to be resolved. They've been looked at, the design's been amended as a result. As the case officers pointed out on the water matters, I feel that we're now at a point where the design isn't perfect, and I think that's what my comments reflected, but it is an outline application, and there is a design there that could be delivered that would be satisfactory to the Highway Authority, and we can go through that detailed process through the processes of the Highway Authority through Section 278 to refine the design. But of course, as you allude to, HGV traffic, getting that through that junction, but also providing something that is safe and attractive for non-motorised users is a challenge. Undoubtedly that is a challenge.
Thank you. A point actually, we're going back to Cambridgeshire County Council, where we don't have any recent data on that, and I can't understand why, with such an important application, that a road traffic survey where you're measuring the traffic flow across the road has been undertaken.
The plane's just going to go over. It'll be 30 seconds, and then can you just can you just repeat the question, please, because the officers didn't hear it. To do this every Wednesday. Last Wednesday was exactly the same. I think we can. Could you re-ask your question again, Councillor Gerstner?
Thank you. We seem to be relying on quite old data, and I can't understand why, on such an important application as this, and given that we're talking about one road in, one road out, we don't have any alternatives. that there hasn't been a traffic survey done by yourselves?
Through the chair, the traffic survey data is up to date, or as up to date as it can be, given the timescale between submission of the application and now. So they did some up-to-date surveys. The traffic conditions in terms of vehicles is up to date. The key here is the vision validate process requires you to then look at how you can reduce the car trips. The issue is the base data for the mode share is quite old. So that is the problem, that you're actually then trying to do a vision and validate on data which is old. So the question is, we do know the traffic, we know the amount of cars, we can make an assumption about the amount of cars that would go to the site given trip rates that are standardised. But what we don't know is how many people we could get out of the cars, because the data for the existing amount of people, like the mode share, is old. So it's very difficult to do a vision and validate when, you know, your data is quite old. But it is, and I think one of my colleagues at Peterborough City Council did allude to this, it's very difficult for us because we used to rely quite significantly on government census data, and the last census data was 2021, which does lead to questions about whether it's valid. But also I would reiterate is a comment that one of my PCC colleagues, or ex-colleagues now, made, is that the status quo hasn't changed that much in terms of the corridor you're looking at. There haven't been any large-scale bus interventions, haven't been any large-scale walking and cycling interventions. So in terms of people's travel habits, there's not a lot that's going to have changed. The train services haven't particularly increased. So you could make an assertion, an argument, that because not a lot has changed since 2011, it's going to be broadly the same in terms of the modes. So it's going to be predominantly car modes with some, very few, cyclists and people also using the bus, and potentially people using the train. So that's why we are saying, well, okay, the data is old, but given what's happened, i.e. not very much to actually change things, we feel that that data set for this route, for this part of Peterborough, and that doesn't mean all, you know, things have changed in Peterborough which have changed things, but for this particular route, we feel that the old, in inverted commas, data is probably going to be about right.
Thank you. One more question, please. Your modelling states that there's going to be queues on the roundabout, the junction roundabout, and you've predicted that the queue could be up to 110 metres. Now we're talking 2034, okay, quite some considerable time away yet, but that's maybe when the science park, which we'd love to see, may come into full fruition. So we're talking about not only the issues and problems now, next year, but we're talking problems in 2034. You state that this is not acceptable and demonstrates that the proposed development will have severe impact on the roundabout. Can you explain and expand on that just a little bit, please?
So just to be clear, it's not our modelling, it's the applicant's modelling that we have reviewed to determine impacts. And yes, what they are required to assess is the base year, so the year when the application is submitted, the year when the application is fully built out, and then 5 years post full build out, so we can determine how the network's going to operate in the future. So all we've done is look at what information has been provided by the applicant, and as we say, they've used up-to-date modelling, so it's all acceptable to us, and it's showing the queues. Well, that's in the TA, the transport assessment, and as I've talked about there, 109 metres on the A605 at the eastern roundabout on the Ralph Butcher Causeway.
Thank you, I've finished, thank you.
Please carry on.
I think And in addition to that, what I would say is the queue length is 190 metres? 109. 109 metres, which is approximately 20 cars-ish. I think the other things that needs to be probably pointed out is the delay in journey. So it was around about 45 seconds, I believe, 46 seconds per vehicle. Now, that was on the basis of the very, very, very minimal mode shares. Now, we are, as we've said, not entirely convinced by that. If the mode share goes up significantly, i.e. it ends up being 80%, when you've got a junction that reaches capacity, as soon as it reaches capacity, it's not a straight line increase in queues. So it doesn't do that. It does that. So effectively it's an exponential increase. You could see delay per vehicle as much as 2 minutes, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, if those mode shares aren't achieved. You know, which is why we are talking about the trip cap and the secondary interventions, as it were, to be looked at if that mode share isn't realised. But that 190 assumes they achieve, 109 assumes they achieve their mode share.
Okay, thank you for answering those questions. Excellent. Anybody else got any more questions for the highways officers? No, or any more questions, clarifications to our officers? Another opportunity if anybody's... No? Right, thank you very much about that. That's super, thank you. I'd like to invite members to debate the item in respect to the material considerations relevant to the application. If you'd like to speak, raise your hand, and Councillor French is first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. First off, I'd like to thank all officers, especially FDC officers who have spent, I believe, about 4 years on this. I've listened carefully to Peterborough and County Council highway officers, and I think that is something that can be overcome further down the line. This is a brownfield site. This is an outlined application. Interesting to read, apart from highway issues, there's very, very few people are objecting. Anglia Water they'll just have to sort themselves out. But interested in 5.21, Fenland District Council Business and Economy Team, 1, shortage of commercial space, advises that there is a shortage of commercial space employment inland in the district and insufficient supply to meet the demand. That's very interesting. When last week we had a planning application for 12 industrial units which was up for refusal. Thankfully it was approved, but that's a different matter. I think the agent has done a lot of hard work on this, yet there is concerns within the A605. As I say, I went there Sunday. I haven't been along there. The state of the road is appalling, but that's a different matter. I will be supporting this application. That's it.
We're still in debate. Anybody want to add to it? Councillor Mifferton, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Listen to this debate, and I think Finland is crying out for something like this. Really, this is an opportunity that we should not miss. I take on board the challenges around the A605. It's pretty much the same thing throughout the whole country. Our road infrastructure is struggling everywhere. That doesn't mean we should not encourage development. So I think the officers have done great work, the agents have done great work, and I do not see I think the benefits outweigh the harm in this case. So without saying too much, I will fully be supporting this application. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Meekins.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's pros and cons to this one, obviously. I think the reality is traffic congestion is just a way of life nowadays. This is an opportunity. We hear there's 1,600 jobs potentially going to be there. Isn't Fenland open for business? You know, and you've got to think about, all right, so the gentleman said at the moment everything's a bit up in the air with regarding businesses coming in, but obviously to put an estimate of 1,600, there must be some background knowledge there. If it doesn't come to Whittlesea, those jobs are going to go somewhere else. You're going to be left. Yeah, not just March, Jan. You're going to be left with that brownfield site. We all know it's had problems in the past in that area. I think we can't afford not to go for this one. And I think also if we grant outline, the developer has then got more ammunition to go and see people and say, look, we've got outline permission for this. We've seen that there's a whole raft of conditions to this. So it's not like if we say yes today, it's not like it's going to be started tomorrow, because I mean there's all these conditions, and personally I think we should go for it big time. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll come in there then Councillor Gerson. Yeah, I'm not going to reiterate what everybody else you guys said. On planning balance, I should be supporting this application. As Councillor Meakin says, these applications don't come around too often. It's a great opportunity for Fenland to get on the map again, so to speak. And I shall be supporting this, but just bear in mind, everybody, our members, this is only an outline planning application with only access agreed. So a lot more meat can come back on the bone if this actually gets passed today. So that's where I'm going to be, but thank you. Councillor Gerson, sorry.
Thank you, members. I'm minded to defer the condition. And I'll just go through a few. I'm not going to labour too long. We've had that already. There's sustainability and mode share concerns. There's cycling and walking infrastructure deficiencies. There's the bus and public transport uncertainties. There's a lot of technical outstanding issues. There's a lot of mitigation put into the conditions. I could labour on for quite a long while, but I won't. I'm not saying it's been rushed. The applicants put in a lot of work. The officers have done a fantastic job on it. But in my personal opinion, and you've heard what I've had to say today, I think we should defer and give the applicant time to go back, especially to highways, and see if there is an engineering, not solution, there is no big solution to the A605, but there may be some mitigations that can be engineered into it. And I'll go back to people don't walk down that road. People don't cycle down it. The aspiration is fantastic, okay? But the road is not conducive. There's a lot of things that can still be put right, including the Crossway Hand Junction. You know, the site is a fantastic opportunity. I'm not saying it isn't, and I'm very supportive of it. But at this moment in time, I cannot support the granting of it, and I would rather have it deferred. I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Oh, Councillor Purser, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm taking consideration that obviously, as you said, Mr. Chairman, it's outline as opposed to full. I'm also taking consideration what Sid and Councillor French said, which I totally agree with both those. So I'm fully supportive of this as well. I'll leave it at that, because it's already been said what my thoughts are. Okay, thank you.
I think probably we've gone through it several times. I don't think anybody else has got to add anything to the debate at all. I think in the presentations, and thank you, Councillor Gerstner, very informative today. We've all listened to what you've got to say. But on balance, for me, as was just before we finish, on balance, I think the job situation, Fenland aspirations, as I mentioned before, hopefully going upwards. I think that for me, the balance, it outweighs the balance of just the road, because as Councillor Gerst has already said, there isn't much you can do with A605. Yes, we can do the potholes. Yes, we can repair the paths, but there is nowhere else to go other than that. So we could make it slightly better. So I am going to support this. So no one else has got any points. Thank you very much. So I'm going to close the debate. So officers, what, have you got anything to add to this? No? Okay, so that brings me on to, have I got a proposer to go with officer recommendation to grant planning permission? So I'll have, right, so Councillor French, I had your hand up first. Have I got a seconder for your proposal? It's Councillor Mifferton. Sorry, Councillor Meekins, I didn't see you at the corner of my eye, but anyway, we've got a proposal to go with officer recommendation to approve this application. It is proposed by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Mifferton. Can I have a show of hands on that proposal, please?
That's 5 votes, Chairman.
Those against? Abstain. So obviously with that, the application has been approved. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. It's been a very good debate, a very good meeting, in my opinion. Good comments made from both sides. So I'm going to close the meeting today at 15:40. So I'm going to declare the meeting closed. And don't forget, members, the next meeting is on December the 10th. Sorry. Thank you.